You know, it's a curiosity to me that smart people often think that stocks create wealth. Stick around, and by the end of this video, you'll see me fully reconstruct why stocks don't create wealth for everyday investors. Now, I hope that this won't offend you if you are a stock investing adherent. I mean, we all learn and understand and experience the world through different lenses, so I want to share with you the thought paradigm that shifted my own personal journey in understanding this. Major stock indices recently flirted with bear market territory. That means a drop of 20% or more from a recent high, and often it's events like that that give people time to pause and reflect on some things. In fact, the Dow had its 8th consecutive weekly loss. That's the longest such streak since 1923. Misery loves companies, I guess, because big tech shrunk down to medium tech. Even stayed reliable companies like Apple and Walmart and Target are tanking, and they've reported disappointing earnings. Now, other than a 1-month flash crash in March of 2020, millennials and Gen Zers have zero experience with a true sustained recession. We haven't had one of those in 13 years, an unusually long period of time. And perhaps those investors will sell low. Perhaps other ones will stay the course. But you know, there's one simple question that exceedingly few people ever ask themselves. Have I ever actually met anyone where stocks made them wealthy? Like creating wealth by just regular retail investing in stocks. Now, I never have. I've never met one person that's done that. And I'm talking about creating wealth. For example, someone that was just getting by, or someone that was middle class, and they transitioned into wealthy just through savvy and shrewd stock investing. I've never met anyone like that. But now, why not? After all, the S&P 500 has averaged about a 10% annual return over time, and traditional stock advisors will often tell you something like about the rule of 72 and how that should create wealth. You've probably heard of that before, the rule of 72. You just take 72, you divide it by your annual percent return, which is 10 in this case, and that result of 7.2 years, that results in the doubling time. Therefore, it should take your money only 7.2 years to double. Well, over decades, with successive doublings, you should have a fantastic retirement and maybe even create wealth. But then why doesn't it? Really, that is due to 5 big drags: inflation, emotion, taxes, fees, and volatility. So let's take your 10% return and subtract all 5 of those drags. Now let's see what kind of return we really end up with after we adjust that return. The first one is inflation. Now, a lot of experts agree that the CPI, which is currently over 8%, drastically understates inflation, and that the true diminished purchasing power of the dollar might be something like 15% right now. But let's just use a longer-term inflation number of 5%. All right, so your 10% annual return from the S&P 500 minus 5% inflation, we now have a 5% return after adjusting for just inflation. Now, the next drag is emotion. Well, everyone knows that you're supposed to buy low and sell high. But so many do exactly the opposite thing. Why is that? People actually have a really hard time buying low, because once the price of a stock or an investment has fallen for such a long time, people really don't want to get involved in it. And the predominant emotion there is discouragement. You kind of get bathed in a media bath of reading all of these negative articles, and a lot of people actually sell low rather than buy low because they're just tired of getting up and checking their stocks and losing money. So we all know we're supposed to buy low, but the human predisposition is actually to sell low. And conversely, why isn't everyone selling high when they're supposed to? Well, it's sort of the the opposite emotion. There's this feeling of momentum. Everyone's making money. You just want to continue to ride the momentum. And really the prevailing emotion is euphoria. However, almost everyone believes that they are an above average investor despite the statistical impossibility of that ever happening. And this effect is called illusory superiority. You know, it's a lot like how when people are polled, 7 out of 10 people believe that they're an above average driver. It's the same with stocks. Okay, so we'll just say that this takes one's 5% inflation adjusted return down to 4%, and that is being really kind, only whittling 1% off there, that emotionally adjusted return. What about taxes and fees? Well, capital gains taxes, they start at 15% and then they go up from there. Currently, the highest ordinary income tax rate is 37%. Even if funds are sheltered in a 401k or other retirement type plans, oftentimes you do need to begin paying taxes as soon as you retire. And fees vary widely. They're all over the place. So an S&P 500 investor's return after it's adjusted for inflation and emotion and taxes and fees could very well be below 2%. We're just being really kind. We'll just say it's whittled down to 2% now. Again, really conservative here. We're not done. What about the effect of volatility on an S&P 500 investor's return or just any stock investor's return? And so many people miss this. The rule of 72 and other projections are based on a fixed annual rate of return. It's called the compound annual growth rate. Now, in something like the rule of 72, the assumption that goes into that is that you get exactly a 10% rate of return year after year, just a really smoothed out return. This is irresponsibly quixotic. The real world just does not work this way. If you have a 20% loss, then you need a 25% gain just to get back to zero. That's simply math. And if you have a 40% loss, you would need a 66.7% gain following that loss just to get back to even. So using this smooth CAGR, compound annual growth rate, what that does is that it diminishes the damaging effect of this return volatility. And now you can see why rates of return for stock investors are often less than 0%. This whole thing crumbled faster than a Nature Valley granola bar, which actually aren't good for you, by the way. There's a lot of processed food and sugars in those things. But note that I even really often have been pretty kind here. You know, I even use 10% to start with, something that a lot of stock investors consider to be a good return over time. And you know, this analysis isn't deeply technical and replete with formulas for pinpoint accuracy, but it helps you begin to understand why you rarely, if ever, will meet anyone that ever acquired wealth with these vehicles as a retail investor after adjusting for inflation and emotion and taxes and fees and volatility. And you know, asking around here at GRE a little bit, our content manager said he once knew someone that did acquire wealth from stocks in a way only because his company IPO'd. So he really didn't acquire wealth from doing it on the retail side. Now, about 10 years ago, when I worked for the State Department of Transportation in an 8-foot by 10-foot blue cubicle, you know, I began to realize some things. Investing in retirement plans makes me safe and normal, and I really don't want to live a safe life. I really don't want to live a normal life. Every dollar that I invest in stocks and mutual funds in similar vehicles, that's a dollar that cannot leverage other people's money. I also realized that retirement plans, you know, their big shortcoming is they're not designed to produce any income until I'm old. And I also realized simply that I am not going to get ahead by following the herd. And you know, later I interviewed the man that actually invented the 401k plan. His name is Ted Benna, and Ted Benna even lamented that the plans are not serving people in the way that they were intended. That kind of completed my catharsis. And note that I have not owned any stock or mutual fund or ETF of any kind since the year 2014. Now, real estate has a few drags too. Understand, for example, one of them is a lot of real estate investors underestimate their property's maintenance and repair costs over time. Ultimately, the fact that real estate pays 5 ways, usually at the same time, is what makes it superior, such that annual rates of return of anything less than 20 to 25% are actually disappointing and with less risk. That's a fully adjusted rate of return. And if you're not initiated on that yet, go ahead and check out the 5-part video series on here. It's paradigm shifting. It will change your life. You've probably seen it already. If you haven't, be sure to check that out. Real Estate Pays 5 Ways. Because real estate is illiquid, it's actually a healthy barrier. It prevents investors from panic buying and panic selling, and therefore it reduces this volatility and emotional component and its deleterious effects on one's portfolio. I don't know anyone where stocks made them wealthy, but I do know a number of people that have done that in real estate investing, including me. I am one of them, and yes, there is probably some bias there because I do tend to hang out in real estate investing circles. The short story about why I have met so many people that have gone from middle class to wealthy with real estate is with leverage. You know, for someone that doesn't want to use leverage and get good debt on properties, I would simply ask you the question, how far do you think you could get in investing if you only use your own money and you won't responsibly use other people's money? Now, to stock investors, leverage can be available, but it's only available to more sophisticated types. It's not as accessible as it is to real estate investors, and oftentimes you can't get the leverage ratio and the ease of access to getting 5-to-1 leverage like you can with real estate. And in real estate, there's also no margin call risk with using leverage. To a younger investor that's potentially experiencing their first bear market now, it's important to understand that stocks generally are not a game that are designed to build wealth in the first place. Times like these make people revert to fundamentals, and I think fundamentally it's important to remember that your success as an investor hinges on your ability to create and provide value for others. And you know, there have been few times in modern history where owning and renting real estate to others provides more intrinsic value than it does today with this increased utility value of housing, while at the same time we have a reduced supply of housing. Wealth comes down to your ability to be valuable. Well, hey, have you ever known anyone that created wealth by investing in stocks? If you do, go ahead and please leave a comment. And I probably just invited a bunch of room in the comments for only those people to comment that have heard of someone that's created wealth through stocks, but I really would like to hear about it. Let me know in a sentence or two how they did that in the comments. Get started with real estate investing at gremarketplace.com. With one login, one time, you can get access to all of our providers. And right now, over there at Marketplace, I'll tell you, our providers with the most active real estate inventory for purchase right now are in Florida, Tennessee, and Ohio. I'll see you over there at GRE Marketplace, where I have a tutorial where I'll lead you around over there so you can get started with real estate investing. If that's of interest to you, I'm Keith Weinhold. I'll see you in the next video.